What is up, guys? The Strong Boys 19 here. And finally, we are here to do our lists of our top 20 favorite albums from last year of 2023. I have, once again, with me a special guest who you may have seen before previously. I have Jake, aka SeditionThroughScorns. How's it going, mate?
Going pretty well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good myself. This is not going to be a very usual list for so many people because both of us do love a lot of metal, but for this video, our list can be surprising as it's a bit of a selection, a bit of variety and variation, because I think 2023 has been a really, really good year for a lot of bands with multiple releases and different genres that has been bursting through. Before we dive into our top 20 favorites, we do have a few honorable mentions. Obviously, with every single list that we do and anyone else does, it's all opinion based. If you want to have your own list, please put them in the comments section down below. If you have some honorable mentions, please feel free to do so as well. So, Jake, do you have any honorable mentions?
As a matter of fact, I do. And first off, before we get into the RML's reviews, I'd like to thank you for having me do this video collaboration with you. And I've had a lot of fun doing our 2021 list, and I feel like this list in particular is going to be full of surprises. And while my list is primarily metal, there's also going to be some albums that a lot of my viewers and subscribers are going to go, I did not expect this at all. So I'll quickly run through my favorite albums of the year list without going into further detail because we want to focus on our actual top 20 list. So my honorable mention albums of the year list is very tough because there's a lot of great albums I was originally planning on to have for the year of 2023, but these albums they felt so short, but still are albums that you definitely also check out. So I'll go through them very quickly, and then we'll get onto the list. So for my honorable mention album list, I have Hell Ripper with Warlocks, Grim, and Withered Hags, Moonlight Sorcery with Horn Lorn of the Thorn Gate, Signs of the Swarm, Amongst the Low and the Empty, Spirit Adrift, Ghost at the Gallows, Sing with Shikabog, Homicidal Ecstasy, To the Grave, Director's Cut, Cryptopsy as Gomera Burns, Wormhole, Almost Human, Nervosa, Jailbreak, The Zenith Passage, Dilithium, Immortal, War Against All, Extermination, Dismemberment, Dehumanization Protocol, Wayfarer, American Gothic, Autopsy, Ashes, Organs, Bloods, and Crypts, Suffocation, Hymns from the Apocrypha, and Crypta, Shades of Sorrow.
Nice. So, my honorable mentions is just a very small selection of albums. By the way, guys, I don't have every single album that are included to be displayed. I have most of them. Some of them are on vinyl, but most of them I have on CD. So, besides which, they're just albums that we really like or love. And the honorable mentions, as Jake said, are albums that we like that didn't quite make it to the list. The first one is the new Suffocation album, which is, to me, fantastic. It's the first album with a new vocalist after Frank Mullen, released through one of my favorite record labels, Nuclear Blast. It's a really, really great debut for the new vocalist, and Suffocation's always one of my most favorite death metal bands. This is the new album, Hymns from the Apocrypha. Brilliant stuff. The next one is the new Cannibal Corpse album, Chaos Horrific, which is, to me, a great follow-up to Violence Unimagined. Violence Unimagined, which I did eventually buy, was really, really good as well. But I have enjoyed a lot of what these death metal titans have been doing for a really long time. The next one is the new Evil, The Unknown. To me, this is not as really strong as Hell Unleashed, but with Aldrake and company, in my opinion, when I reviewed the album, I thought it was really good stuff, despite that some people would see it as a bit of a rip-off of Metallica, but hey, I think this was a bit of a difference. The songwriting changes. That doesn't mean that it's weak stuff, because there are some awesome stuff on this. Another album that I have on CD, which I forgot to put here, is the new Cryptopsy album, which to me is the first album after over 10 years that I did enjoy. There were some flaws with the album, like some of the lyrical content, and it's just half an hour long. There are some cool stuff on this new album as well. And this last one, this was originally going to be in my top 20. It's not in my actual top 20 in the end. The new Ladytron album, Times Arrow, which was my first review from 2023 that I did do. This was a band that I was really glad to discover, as many people like Ladytron a lot with their poppy, synthy ability with melody and production. The reason why it's not in my top 20 is because I have not listened to Ladytron enough for the whole discography to be in the top 20. But this was a really, really nice, well-made album. So, now onto our top 20s. Let's start with you, Jake. We'll go each album with a few minutes in between. So, let's start with yours.
Okay, so coming in number 20 is from an underground death metal band from Australia. And of course, Australia is known for its wonderful hardcore metal scene, but I think these guys, I haven't really seen a lot of people talking about them on Metal Archives and other YouTubers that I watch, but I'm going to bring some recognition because these guys deserve immediate attention. So my 20th favorite album of 2023 is by the band Impetuous Ritual with the album Iniquitous Barbaric Synthesis, and this was released on one of my favorite record labels of all time, known as Profile Lord Records. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Impetuous Ritual, they are a death metal band based out of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, and to describe to the sound is very cathartic, frantic, mystical, very atmospheric style of death metal, but there's also influences of blackened death metal. There's a little bit of grindcore in the mix, and this album takes the listener into this immersive, expansive, and diverse universe where this record tells a tale that these guys know exactly what they're doing, because you get gross vocals, you get great guitar work, solid drum bass. The production on here is absolutely fantastic. It is raw. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and also the instrumentation work on this record is very well complemented, as these members really do provide and know exactly what they're going to. So if you love your death metal to be experimental, blackened, technical at times it needs to be, and also very visceral, if you're fans of Immolation, Incantation, Portal, Dead Congregation, if you're a fan of that style of death metal, definitely check it out. So number 20, Impetuous Ritual with Iniquitous Barbaric Synthesis.
Okay, my number 20. This is the album that was really close to my top 15. But the more I have been thinking about this, I just think it's better to be into the number 20 spot, because I think there are better albums than this one, but that does not mean that I will just ignore this, because this was an album that I really like very, very much. And it is the new Metallica album, 72 Seasons. So I understand with many criticisms that a lot of people have said, with a bit of rehashed moments on some of the songwriting to a bit of the production, and more of a controversial flack of the album, which is the album's length. When I reviewed this album, I have given it a pretty positive review, that I really like a lot of what this album has been. But months later, some of the songs were big, big growers with me. I love Shadows Follow to the title track, Inamorata, and I do believe, in my opinion, that tracks like Room of Mirrors to tracks from the second half of the album, like Too Far Gone, are absolutely great. They are memorable. Lyrically, it's one of Hetfield's best in a long time. I do defend my honest opinion that I do think this is one of my favorite Metallica albums that I prefer over the last two records. The other two albums previously before this were really good, but there's something about 72 Seasons that I have grown to really appreciate this. And I think it's more of the consistency. It's not a lot of people's favorite Metallica album in terms of the newer direction. And I will say this, the Metallica of old is done. And I think it's like with Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden have continued to be very strong and made newer albums with their continuing sound. And I believe Metallica did do that very well after the 90s and early 2000s periods from Load and Reload and State Anger. But for my defense, this is a brilliant album from one of the big four. So there you go, 72 Seasons by Metallica at number 20.
I haven't really given myself a full chance to listen to the new Metallica album, but from what I've been hearing, aside from the singles, I really quite enjoyed this album, and I do think it is objectively better than Hardwired to Self-Destruct, which might be a hot take, but I don't really care. I think it's better.
Yeah.
Strong start for your album. I do enjoy some of that stuff. But okay, so coming in at number 19 is perhaps my favorite doom metal album of the year, and I got to give a huge shout out to the Metal Meltdown because he is the guy that got me into this band. Around sometime late last year or 2021, I can't remember exactly, but I'm going to be talking about it with you guys today. So coming at number 19, we have a Canadian heavy doom metal band known as Smolder with the record Violent Creed of Vengeance, and this is released on Cruise Doomstar Music. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Smolder, they play a contemporary fantasy medieval style of heavy metal with doom and sludge influences. These guys surely know how to create doom metal the right way. And of course, when you think of doom metal, you think of bands like Candlemass, Electric Wizard, Pallbearer, Lycus, Sleep, and all the great essential bands for their time. With Smolder, however, they created an imagery and a sound that is so blissful, majestic, heroic. These guys surely know what they're fully capable of having, catchy choruses, great progression work. The instrumentals are actually on point. You can hear atmospheric layers. You can hear some hard rock tendencies in the mix. And you can hear a lot of power metal singing influences. You can hear some symphonic metal works. You hear some new wave of British heavy metal in the veins of like Ice Earth, Iron Maiden, or anyone in that regard. And I really enjoyed this record because it does show the band that they're not afraid to experiment within the experimentation on this record. So if you are fans of Candlemass, Eternal Champion, Vanilla Road, Grand Magnus, Iron Maiden, with a contemporary fantasy theme-like style of heavy and doom metal, definitely check out Smolder. And coming number 18 is Violent Creed of Vengeance by Smolder. An absolute enjoyable record that every fan should hear in their collection.
Pretty cool idea to have albums that are really different to what a band has done previously, and with later albums they would like to explore things. I do really appreciate when bands decide to do that, because there are some albums in this list from bands that have pretty much done the same thing. Okay, so my number 19 in the list, I don't need to say a lot of stuff around this band because it's from a musician who's been one of my favourites and one of Jake's favourites. Number 19 is the new Death Clock album, Death Album 4. Brendan Small and Company, it's just Death Clock returning after a long time from the release of the Death Album 3 record. I definitely will see that Death Album 4 is potentially one of Brendan Small's more heavier sounding albums into the whole discography. His skills have just been incredible. The humorous lyrics to a lot of the fantastic delivery, along with the other musicians, Gene Hoglan being one of them, the Atomic Clock. I've been a fan of Metalocalypse for a long time, and if anyone wants to check out Metalocalypse, do not miss out on it because it's It's a very dedicated, well worth a watch looking series that you'll love as much as Death Clock's music. So Death Album 4 by Death Clock is a terrific album, monstrous riffs and awesome writings with the production as well to, the signature sound of what Death Clock has been doing for a long time. Number 19, Death Album 4 by Death Clock.
You know what's funny? That album was actually going to be my top favorites of the year, but it just got squished by other albums. But it's still a fantastic record. And of course, being a huge Death Clock fan, the imagery and the artistic direction that Brent Scott has created after nearly a decade of actual material is really surprising. I think personally that it's some of his finest work since Death Clock album 1, which is my personal favorite in his talent. But there's no there's no bad Death Clock album at all. And of course, if you're a fan of the show, it's definitely worth listening to. So excellent choice. Great record too.
Cheers.
Okay, so coming in at number 18 is from another underground death metal band that a lot of my friends have recommended me since this album first came out. And upon listening to this record, I was immediately hooked. So coming in at number 18 is by the death metal band from all the way from Texas known as Creeping Death. And the record is called Boundless Domain. And this is an independent release that is self-released through the band. Now, not to be confused with the song Creeping Death from Metallica, Creeping Death is an American death metal band that's been around since 2015 from Texas. And this record, to me, is their most refined, accessible, and structured records to date. They play a style of contemporary, monolithic, bone-crushing style of death metal, but there's also some hardcore influences in the mix, kind of similar to bands like No Zodiac, Venom Prison. If you're into that style of music, you're definitely going to appreciate this record. The members of Creeping Death have not only utilized and layered beautiful, crafty compositions, the tempo changes are absolutely fantastic, and the lyricism behind the contents of this album is emotional, convicting, unapologetic, and just downright exhilarating. And I also really enjoy the amount of detail, passion, and consistency this band has to offer. So if you are fans of death metal with hardcore influences, preferably bands like Homewrecker, No Zodiac, Venom Prison, with a more modern, structurized tone, definitely check this one out. So number 18, Creeping Death by Boundless Domain, absolute banker front to back.
My number 18 is going to be an album called Quaranta by Danny Brown. Danny Brown is one of my favorites, newer generations of the hip-hop scene. While I have been a big fan of his album Atrocity Exhibition, and with Danny being one of my favorites in today's change in the direction of hip-hop, this latest album of his, in his discography, is his most personal. And while it is very out there, completely creative in experiments, through the instrumentation to the samples, what really impressed me is his open and completely free feelings around his depression and mental health, which I definitely feel the heart that has been made for the album. It's just like with Kendrick Lamar for Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and I think Danny Brown has bravely portrayed his own connecting emotions that touches a lot of the listeners with the feels. It's not, to me, Danny, at one of his strongest albums, because his discography previously, like with Triple X and the aforementioned Atrocity Exhibition, are brilliant stuff. But the new Danny Brown album, to me, can be as mournful, as moving, but it still is a touching record. And it's no surprise that some fans would see this as, their favorite or the best album he's done since when he received a lot of critical acclaim. So it's a fantastic album to Danny Brown's discography. So that is a brilliant album called Quaranta by Danny Brown.
I'll have to check that album out sometime and see what the fuss is all about. So, okay, so coming in at number 17 It's from one of my all-time favorite metalcore bands that I've been a fan since I was in high school. And the moment I heard about these guys were going to release a brand new record, I was all on board. And quite possibly, might be my favorite album that they've ever created. And I'm going to talk about the latest full-length album from one of my all-time favorite bands in the metalcore genre, known as Unearth. And the record is titled The Wretched and the Ruinous, which is released on Century Media Records. Now, when I was younger, getting to the side of metalcore bands such as As I Lay Dying, Trivium, August Burns Red, Demon Hunter, early Soilwork, On Earth to me is one of the most underrated bands in the metalcore genre. And hell, I can honestly say that the later era of On Earth, they've decided to experiment a lot more branches and components into the music, adding more elements of heavy metal, thrash metal, and even some Gothenburg melodic death metal style riffage. Because this album not only captures the brilliancy and the signature sound that fans are accustomed to know who Unearth really is about, but tracks like Mother Betrayal, Into the Abyss, and my favorite Beat Eradicator deliver heart-stopping drum passages, audible bass tones, and vocalist Trevor Phillips, who's been the heart and soul of his fans since the band's inception, gives it his most dynamic, his most versatile, and his intelligence into his visionary acts into creating this record is absolutely fantastic. There's also great harmonic work, captivating presentations. The production on here is very stellar. You can definitely hear the crafted instrumentals where every band counterparts and shines without overstaying its welcome. And it's truly remarkable to see a band that's been going around for almost 3 decades now. Hard to believe I'm saying that. Is that a band like On Earth just continuously brings new ideas, conceptual ideas, and just something that's a little bit different from their past work. And honestly, this might be their best album in a very long time. So coming at number 17 is On Earth with The Wretched and the Ruinous, my favorite metalcore album of 2023 from one of my favorite metalcore bands of all time. This is an absolute fantastic record.
I haven't listened to a lot of metalcore, but I have had some strong connection with the genre previously. I really enjoy a lot of the style, but I haven't listened to a lot of the newer direction of the metalcore genre for these newer bands or long time metalcore bands. So I'll have to dig myself back into the genre. Okay. My number 17 is from a band that a lot of metal fans love or really like. I won't say too much because I want to discover the earlier albums for myself, and that is the new Enslaved album, which is called Heimdall. I might have said that right or wrong, but Heimdall. Yeah. But Enslaved have been a band I've always heard really good things about, and when I listen to this album, to me this is kind of like a difference through beloved black metal elements that they've created for a long time, but it can be pretty progressive. There's some gorgeous gentle moments on the album, having a separate soundscape, and the artwork definitely fits in with the overall sound. Enslaved are a band that definitely caught my interest, finally, for quite a long time, because I have heard of the band's name from one of their albums from the past 10 years. But this is a really, really great album that has impressed me so much, from its beefy production to fantastic performances through the writing and the vocals. The musicianship on here is intriguing. There's a lot of these progressive elements around a lot of these tracks that did make a great mixture of the sounds and the atmosphere these guys have achieved on this one.
Excellent pick and a great album by Enslaved. I can arguably say that I think this is their best album, and I think it's objectively better than their past couples, but it's a great blend of progressive, black metal, and even folk metal, which I think that the three genres combining of what they've been doing for aeons, it just works wonders. And honestly, I don't think there's even a bad Enslaved album that I don't dislike, but fantastic choice and a great record. Okay, so coming at number 16, we're going to go back into my roots of Talking about a band from my neck of the woods, being the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Oregon. I'm going to give these guys a lot of love because I've been following them for about a couple of years now. And coming at number 16 is from one of my favorite upcoming black metal bands in the realms of extreme music, known as Spirit Possession, entitled Of the Sign. And this is also released on Profile Lord Records. Now, Spirit Possession is a underground black metal band that is very atmospheric, adrenaline, hard-hitting style of black metal, which they like to experiment different musical ideas, incorporating elements of melodic black metal. There's some symphonic black metal mixtures in the mix. And when I first heard about this record, I was kind of on the fence of not wanting to get this album a fair chance, but as someone who is an advocate listener of the black metal genre and likes a plenty full of bands within that style of genre, from the first wave, the second wave, and to the other bands of their genre. Spirit Possession takes this, the members of this band takes this album to such great heights, and they upscale the musicality, the production, the compositions, the craftsmanship. It's a lot more refined, it's more tighter, it's more structured, there's more diversity to the instrumentation work, and some of their songs can be melodic, they can be heavy, they can be slow at times when they need to be. And it's something I really miss about black metal is that most black metal bands, they more cater to focusing on just having relentless drum blast beats, fast guitars, and just fast-paced style vocals. But what really made me like this record is that they're experimenting different soundscapes on this record where you feel like it is very distinctive and it gives that raw, gritty, old school approach, kind of similar to bands like Dark Throne, Dark Funeral, Marduk, Watain, that type of approach of this record. So if you are fans of those bands I mentioned, I probably mentioned, with a sound that's very contemporary, symphonic, melodic, and gritty at times, definitely check it out. So coming number 16 is Spirit Adrift with the record Of the Sign. Definitely check it out.
My number 16 into this list. So from enslaved to a pop artist, I've always heard a lot of good things about this artist because of the rave praise reviews about this album, and that is the Caroline Polachek album, Desire I Want to Turn Into You. This is like a mixture around a lot of excellent vocal delivery, and the instrumentation can have elements like in a Sunshine pop type flavor to a bit of electronic pieces here and there. It's a big mixture in between these very memorable and such a positive sounding album. Yes, when it comes to newer pop artists, Caroline did acquire moments around the auto-tune, which I despise still, but I think the auto-tune around this record is like not as heavily, overdone, like making it completely unlistenable, because there's rhythm to it as well as with the instrumentation, and to hear Caroline's own vocals, to combine that with studio techniques and production, it's quite an irresistible album through the melody to a lot of the excellent songs on this, and it's almost a near perfect album, and I was really pleased I did discover this. So yeah, from a heavier album into something like this. This is why I said earlier it's a surprise and a bit of a variety. Well, actually, a lot of variation in terms of different styles. But this is, to me, a great, great album. This was almost my favorite pop album of the year, because I do like to check out musicians in the style with influences of bands or genres that I like FKA Twigs being an example. But anyway, that is my number 16 pick for Desire I Want to Turn Into You by Caroline Polachek.
Very well articulated and descriptive. I'll definitely have to check it out for sure and give you my honest opinion after this video. Number 16. We have from one of my many favorite brutal death metal bands I'm also really good friends with, and they are huge fans of my work, so I gotta give them the love and respect they rightfully deserve. So coming in at number 16, we have from the band Horror Bethlehem entitled Ritual of Homicide. And this is released from one of my favorite death metal records in the scene right now, known as Comatose Music. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Horror Bethlehem, they are a brutal death, black and death metal band from Austin, Texas. And to describe their sound, it's very blackened, eerie, atmospheric, powerful, yet menacing style of brutal death metal with black and death metal influences. These guys are heavily influenced by Behemoth, Archgo, Belphegor, early Behemoth, Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, that more satanic, blasphemous, gory hybrid style of extreme music that I'm a big fan of. And what really made me like this record in comparison to the early works is that they decided to keep their traditional sound from their previous records, but they upscaled and they made the musicianship a lot more tighter. It's a lot more focused. The lyricisms are more narrative. They speak different messages, and the compositions are just absolutely unadulterated. And you can definitely hear that the band is experiencing a lot more passages within the black metal scene, which unleashes a huge force of soundscape barriers and sonic assault, from the temples to the mid-page instrumentation work. And these songs bring a lot of surrealistic moments where you hear songs like Sermon of the Legend Spirit, Monolith of Creation, and my personal favorite being Nail in Your Coffin, where they decided to take the black and devil influences and they take the more thrashy, Goldport-esque style leads, and they brought something that's admirable, compassionate, and honestly, it's such a work of art. So if you are fans of brutal death metal with black and death metal influences with some thrash riffage here and there, definitely check it out. So number 16 for Bethlehem with Ritual of Homicide.
My number 15 is one album that has absolutely surprised me. This is the only album to be featured in the list that's released through 20 Buck Spin, a record label that I've heard really good things about. But I've heard that a lot of people either really like the album and say it as their favorite, or still stick to the early stuff better than this one, but they still like it. And it's almost my favorite death metal album of the year. And that is the new Tomb Mold record, The Enduring Spirit.
Fuck yes.
It's a very huge album because it's one band that I have not at all heard of previously. And the artwork did interest me. This is the sticker I put on the jewel case, by the way. So the artwork did intrigue me. And when I listened to the music on this album, as well as to look into the lyrics, these guys have made an amazing record. The production is phenomenal. There's a lot of precise technicality, progressive metal influences, and these incredible deliveries into the versatility through the insane riffs to these perfect sounding vocals. And it's a well made effort of an album, because Tomb Mold did make an album that has made a huge strength that has been growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Almost all the tracks on this have just been incredible. It was one of those albums that almost made me speechless, because I did not really expect The Enduring Spirit to be as terrific, as monstrous, and just, something else that I was really, really happy to finally get into, this style of music in metal. So that is The Enduring Spirit by Tomb Mold at number 15.
One of my many favorite bands in the death metal scene, and you might be able to see the album in your list. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out and continue. Coming in number 15. This is going to be an album that is very divisive for a lot of fans, whether you like this album or you're not, but I've always had a special place in my heart, preferably their early material. But this album I'm not going to go over it too much, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So coming at number 15 is the latest album from In Flames entitled Foregone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are you ranking this album this low on your album of the year list? Well, I've heard better albums that came out before this record even came out. But as a longtime In Flames fan since I was in middle school with albums like Colony, The Gesture Brace, Clayman, Reroute to Remain, all those are fantastic albums in their right way. Personally speaking, Foregone is a massive departure within their early melodic death metal sound territories. Instead, they went to more of a groove, alternative, metalcore-driven style. But however, I feel like this album, over time, the more times I listened to it, the better with each listen I personally got into. And I strongly disagree with a lot of fans saying that this album is a return to form. It may not be entirely the case, but for me personally, this album is a much more superior version of their last 3 or 4 records. This record does showcase a lot of their early material, preferably with albums like The Soundtrack to Your Escape, A Sense of Purpose, and Sounds of Playground Fading, but a lot more modern, a lot more groovy, a lot more alternative driven. There are some melodic death metal riffages here and there, but you don't get to hear it very often in comparison to their previous work, but their history, their reputation, and the influence they brought in the Scandinavian Swedish metal scene has been superb. And of course, In Flames being one of my favorite bands of all time. I was skeptical about this at first when I first heard songs like Foregone Part 1 and Meet Your Maker, which I'm like, okay, those songs don't really gravitate me, but the more that I listened to it, the better I got to appreciate the experimentation, the musical direction, and the artistic talent that these guys truly have to offer. Um, Personally, I think this is the best In Flames record since Come Clarity, which, in my personal opinion, was the last great record from In Flames that I personally enjoyed. But this album brought me back to hearing some of their early 2000s work with a lot more modern tones, and they transitioned themselves over time. But if you're expecting to hear a pure melodic death metal record, you are going to be sorely disappointed because you're not going to get that exactly upon listening to this record. So, once again, In Flames, one of my favorite bands of all time. I love their early works, but I do listen to this album on a daily basis. But if you are fans that like the later 2000s era, like Come Clarity, Sounds of Playground Fading, A Sense of Purpose, Soundtrack to Your Escape, if you like those records with a more mature, progressive, uncompromising style of metal, definitely check it out. So, number 15, Foregone by In Flames.
Foregone was actually another honorable mention record I forgot to mention earlier on. Um, I've moved away from In Flames for a very long time after when I tried with albums post Con Clarity. Siren Charms was just such a piece of shit, and I haven't gone back to them. But with Foregone, it was an album that totally made me think, like, why haven't they done something like this previously? While I loved still a lot of the earlier '90s In Flames, to a bit of the 2000s In Flames, but Foregone, I really enjoyed that one. Number 14 in the list, it's another solo album from a band that he is now back with, a band called Porcupine Tree. This is a solo album from this musician, the new Steven Wilson album, The Harmony Codex. This is the first Steven Wilson album that I have once again bought, just like with a $20 Spin released album. Steven Wilson I have a lot of respect for. And with the Harmony Codex, it's very much a return to the forward-thinking open-mindedness, because he did make more of a poppy synth type of album from The Future Bites, his last album. But Steven Wilson has decided to incorporate more of these colourful synths and bigger musicianship in a progressive rock vein, but as well as with some balladry that contains very well performed vocals from Steven to the harmonies, and very nice guitar work, and some of the instrumentation on here, very, very strong on here. A lot of music to this album is full of texture. Some of these ambience pieces has been thrown into this mix as well. I really like this album a lot. I always have heard loads of good things about previous Steven Wilson albums like The Raven That Refused to Sing and some stuff from Porcupine Tree as well. But I am at the moment a newcomer to Steven's stuff, as well as with Porcupine Tree as well. So that is number 14 with Steven Wilson's The Harmony Codex.
I haven't really given myself a full chance to listen to Steven Wilson, but I am a pretty big fan of Porcupine Tree, and I do think that Porcupine Tree was way ahead of its curve to create music that's very progressive, atmospheric, and also very soothing and melancholic at times. But it's awesome to see that he's focusing more on his solo project at Porcupine Tree. But hopefully in due time we'll get a new Porcupine Tree in the future, but we'll see what happens. Coming in number 14, we have possibly my favorite grindcore album of the year. And this album I'm about to talk to you guys right now is from a band that definitely deserves your immediate attention. And when I first heard about this band was making a new record, I was emotionally excited because this is a band that I truly feel deserves to be on your radar for any fans of extreme music. So coming number 14, we have the latest album from one of my favorite grindcore bands in the scene right now, known as Gridley, entitled Coronet Juniper, which is released on Willowtip Records. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Gridley, they are a technical grindcore, industrial, avant-garde, experimental style of metal that really incorporates and it tries to make music that's very menacing, meaningful, sorrowful, abrasive. These guys surely know how to create their compositions and the way that they use their songwriting with infectious melodies, groovy undertones, fantastic layers of vocals, bass, guitars, and drums. They all complement one another, giving every instrument passage and layer as well as the soundscapes to shine throughout the album's moodiness into a lot more dominating yet technical style approach within the band that they're trying to go into upon making this record. Songs like Pitch Black Resolve, Silk Ash Cascade, Octave Serpent, and my personal favorite being The Repellent. You get jaw-dropping passages. You get to see the band's more versatile, recordy, and potent material that they ever created. And this is actually their first record in nearly a decade after trying to figure out what they wanted to vision to make music that's very stylistic, atmospheric, technical. It's all that really great stuff. If you are fans of Discordant Axis, Fuck the Facts, Kill the Clients, Pig Destroyer, and Garphobic Nosebleed with a more sporadic, technical, aggressive hybrid of grindcore with so much variation to choose from, definitely check it out. So coming in number 14 is Gridley with Coronet Juniper.
My number 13 is the longest album out of the ones that are on this list. 2-hour album from one of my favorite experimental rock bands. That is the new Swans album, The Beggar. The Beggar is an album which a lot of people have cited this when it first came out as the favorite album of theirs in a long time, or along with To Be Kind. This was, known as one of the strongest ones when they've reformed. Michael Gira's lyrics on this album are intensely deep. They are pretty mournful, heavily thinking to himself about his own vision on his own mortality. And if that isn't as heavy enough, the music on the album is pretty much the exact same words. It's, to me, an excellent album for one of the mastermind bands in the genre. It's a multiplying band that has made countless albums through different genres, post-rock, drone, to industrial, noise rock, and it's a thrilling experience, this album is, and this was an album which has been as intensifying. I do believe To Be Kind is at the moment, to me, the strongest Swans album they have made in a long time, that follows its own merit to be added with the other classics from their discography. But The Beggar is a really thought-provoking, powerful album. So, number 13, The Beggar by Swans.
I've heard a lot of people talking about that record, from Needle Drop, your review, and other people saying how imaginative and explorative that record is, and it's a record that's definitely not for the faint of heart, because you do have to appreciate the musicality and the dynamics that they're going for. So, an excellent choice of a record, and definitely one of their best albums in a long time, personally speaking. Coming in at number 13, we're getting to the good stuff now. This is from one of my favorite underground death metal bands, and I'm also really good friends with the owner of this record label. And personally speaking, this is the best Swedish extreme metal album of the year, personally, in my personal opinion. Number 13, we have one of my favorite bands in the scene right now, known as Wretched Fate, and the album is entitled Carnal Heresy, which is released on Redefining Darkness Records. Now, Sweden is home to so many great bands that I've listened to for so many years, ever since I was a teenager, getting to know the forefront, the influence, and the legacy that the bands are heavily known for. Bands like Arch Enemy, Hypocrisy, At the Gates, Amon Amarth, Unanimated, all fantastic bands in their own respective way. Wretched Fate, on the other hand, they take their influences of borrowing death metal with hardcore, with like some hardcore punk influences. It really reminds me a lot of bands like Bloodbath, Entomb, Dismembered, Unleashed, that low, gritty, lo-fi style of death metal within the early to late 90s stretch of death metal. This record is very powerhouse driven, in which, in my opinion, I can definitely see this band getting a lot more exposure in the near future. And everything from the amazing HM2 production, raw guitar tones, blistering drum work, grossed out like vocals that makes you want to not only lose your sanity, but to headbang to every single track upon listening to this record. And this album really introduced the members of this band to create a record that is sickening, chaotic, and extreme as they ever sounded before, lyrically, musically, and sonically speaking. Songs like Morbid Testament, Momentary Suicide, and Mind Destructure, you'll get to hear their influences of borrowing traditional Swedish death metal arrangements, but they also incorporate Wolverine blues-esque style melodies of Entomb. And the way that they did these tracks are just absolutely fantastic, because not only they don't overstay its welcome, but they don't sound lifeless. They don't sound stale. They bring a lot of rejuvenation and organic growth into the musicality. And I do think that this is some of their best material in a very long time. So if you are fans of Bloodbath, Entomb, Dismembered, Day Creeper, with a sound that's triumphant, thrashy paced, and very eviscerating, definitely check it out. So number 13, Wretched Fate, Carnal Heresy.
I think some of the viewers who watch my videos or streams do recommend albums that they really like. They told me to check them out. I have heard some of them, but I apologize I didn't review them. 23 is a very consistent year for the death metal genre, and I just didn't expect it to be so exploding. The newer faces of musicians in the genre to long ongoing bands that have released new albums. That genre is pretty hectic. I mean, really hectic for 23. Okay, my number 12, this is one album that I have enjoyed very, very much. It was originally going to be close to my top 10, or in my top 10, a few months previously, and it's from one of my favourite alternative rock bands, Foo Fighters, but here we are. It's
Great
an album
record.
which has nailed a lot of emotions, because we know why Dave Grohl and company wanted to make this album, because both Virginia Grohl, Dave's mother, and Taylor Hawkins have passed away. I think it was a beautiful moment into their memories to shine, and for this being a very personal record that it is, Dave Grohl has made some of the Foo Fighters' strongest songs in a very, very long time here. The vulnerability, the honesty, and yet the sadness that was so nailed on point for Dave vocally and lyrically. I always really like the Foo Fighters. They've been one of my favourites in the genre, but I think But Here We Are definitely deserved a lot of the praise. And it's no wonder some of the Fighters fans pick this as the best album they've done ever or in a long time. Like with Wasting Light, wonderful album to dedicate the memories of both Virginia and Tyler. So number 12 is the beautiful album But Here We Are by Foo Fighters.
I agree 100% all the way through about that record. As a big Foo Fighters fan myself, I was devastated when I heard Taylor Hawkins passed away, and I always wanted to catch them live, but sadly, his passing really took a toll on the drumming world. And a little fun fact for those who don't know, Taylor Hawkins also used to do the drums for Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, which is one of my favorite non-metal records of all time. And he also did one of Coheed and Cambria's records. I think it was in 2007, if I remember. But Taylor Hawkins was such a wonderful, passionate, delivering drummer that I truly miss. And honestly, he is one of my favorite rock musicians of all time. And just not seeing him with us anymore really hurts me. So that record definitely is something else. And well done for Foo Fighters. So much respect for them for carrying the legacy of Taylor. He will definitely be missed. Coming in at number 12, we have another underground black metal band that a lot of my peers and YouTubers that I've been following have been talking about this album in its full high praise, and it definitely well deserves to be on my album tier list. Coming number 12, we have the Canadian black metal band Anti-Faxive entitled Hive Mind Narcosis, which is released on one of my favorite records known as Dark Descent Records. Anti-Faxive, what I consider to be one of the most prolific, upcoming black metal bands that are really trying to push the wave and boundary to create something that's depressive, experimental, and wonderfully crafted. And with this record, personally speaking, this is the best sounding record that I have ever heard coming from this band. This record showcases the band's experimental, melodic, very cathartic style of black metal, but it also features a lot of dread, a lot of manifestation. It's sorrowful when it has to be, and there's moments when you listen to this record that you can hear a lot of melodic black metal influences, but there's also some very unique avant-garde approaches that they're trying to go for, which is something quite unusual because for a band like Anti-Faxive that's very avant-garde based, you don't get to hear a lot of bands trying to focus on one component, musically speaking. But the way that they expanded their horizons and incorporate unique layers, progressive passages, and a production that is so menacing, unsettling, haunting, very melancholic. This is a record that definitely deserves to be in your listening rotation. It does take a lot of time and effort to really understand the imagery and the ideology that the band has been trying to go for. But if you know the genre and the style that they're going for, I think you'll definitely get a kick out of this record. But if you are fans of Negative Plane, Imperial Triumphant, Deathspell Omega, with a artistic, experimental, wonderfully crafted hybrid of avant-garde black metal with atmospheric and melodic black metal undertones, this is a record you definitely need to check out. So number 12, Anti-Faxive, Hive Mind Narcosis. An absolute incredible embodiment of work, and in my opinion, the band's best work to date.
Number 11, this one album here. I really wanted this to be in my top 10 because it's a monstrous record, monstrous one at that. It is just as intensifying for a band that has made a very consistent discography through their signature sound, variation lyrically, that has been, to me, very, very good, and the musicianship to the dominating power of the band musically. Some people love this as their favorite or one of the best. My favorite death metal album of the year, Cattle Decapitation with Terrorsight. Terrorsight was an album that has got so many amazing levels of brilliance, and Travis motherfucking Ryan, his vocals, his shrieks, his tones are out of this world. It's mind-boggling that along with Will Ramos from Lorna Shore,
For sure.
yeah, musicians have made music as punishing and unique. And to me, Cattle is one of the best examples of that in the today state of the genre. The production, which some people have been critical about being overproduced, I can see that, but it's the instrumentation that was winning me all over. And I have no idea which album is my favorite at the moment, because some people pick this or Death Atlas or the Monolith album, but this is a crushing, brutalizing album with some of my favorite tracks from the band they've done in a while. What can I say about Terrorsight other than being like an apocalyptic themed album, but with phenomenal results as a band? Terrorsight, Cattle Decapitation at number 11.
I fucking love Cattle Decapitation, and you saw my fist lit up when I first heard the word cattle. I'm like, yes, it's such a great record, and quite honestly, Cattle Decapitation does no wrong. I've got to see them live numerous times. I got to meet Travis Bryan, hang out with him for about half an hour, and I also got to interview the guitarist. Shout out to Josh Ilmo of the band. I got to interview him on their final farewell tour with Suffocation, one of my favorite tours I've ever been a part of, and it is just such a great record, and you might see that album on the year list. Oh,
Yes.
coming in at number 11. This one is another black metal band from my hometown of the neck of the woods, and you'll see a lot of bands coming from my neck of the woods because I like to give more love for these bands. This band, this melodic black metal band, I've been following since 2018. I'm very good friends with the band. I got to interview them on my birthday in 2020 before the world got shut down. And I'm also very good friends. I'm also really great acquaintances with this band. But this band may not entirely be for you, but if you know what I'm about to say, then maybe your perspective on what I'm going to talk about might change it. So coming in number 11, we have Uwada with the record Perpetual Natura. And this was released on the record label known as Eyes of Wall. Now, Uwada is a band that is very divisive within the black metal community, whether you like them or you don't, due to their ideology, due to the imagery, due to the band's presentation, their styling, and all that. But if you take that all aside and just listen to the amazing structured pieces of melodic black metal, you can definitely see that this band is going to a much more progressive, atmospheric, more darkened theme style of melodic black metal that is very much in the veins of Igwa, Dissection, Sacramentum, Volcandra, Emperor. If you are a fan of this style of music, definitely check this one out. The lyrical content on this record is absolutely fantastic because you get to hear influences from paganism, nature, philanthropy, nihilism, philosophy. The lyricist, Jake Superchi, huge friend of mine. I talk to him on Facebook Messenger all the time. When I got to interview him, I talked about how he took a lot of influences on how he wanted to make a record that is adventurous and also very well articulated. And he did tell me what he was going to say. This record is so consistent, it is creative, it is progressive, but there's a lot of diversity and there's a lot of authentication where these guys show no mercy, no hesitation, and they are no denying that they're taking the new evolution of American black metal to a whole new approach, a new dimension and dynamic. From the amazing soaring like vocals, cathartic blast beats, audible guitar rippages, audible bass tones, and the musical compositions to be explosive and penetrating, this record does showcase a lot of diabolical connections which are built upon such wonderful foundations, and their discovery alongside their instrumentation work is such a continuous yet inspiring, very encouraging record that transcends the listener into almost hearing like a pagan-like winter aesthetic style of record that really gives me the chills because you'll hear songs like the title track, for example. It is very well, it's cold, it's calculated, and just showcasing a lot of emotion and pure brilliancy that this record and this band are trying to aim for. But if you are fans of melodic black metal with tinges of traditional black metal and a little bit of symphonic influences, for fans like Dissection, Emperor, Unanimated, Volcandra, Old Man's Child, Dimmu Borgir, if you are a fan of that type of melodic black metal, definitely check it out. So coming at number 11 is Iwata with Perpetual Natura.